Let me ask you something, and I want you to actually think about this. Don't just let it pass through your ears like background noise. What time did you wake up this morning? What was the first thing you reached for? What did you think about in the shower? What did you eat? What route did you take to work, or to your desk, or to your couch? And here's the real question. When was the last time any of those answers were actually different? Because here's what's happening right now. In this moment, while you think you are living your life, you are not living your life. You are running your programming, and most people will watch this, nod along, maybe even share it, and then tomorrow morning they will wake up at the same time, reach for the same thing, think the same thoughts, and eat the same breakfast. Not because they chose to, because they never chose differently. And that is the prison. Not a dramatic prison, not chains and iron bars and a guard at the door. A quiet prison, a comfortable prison, a prison that looks from the outside and from the inside exactly like your life. Here's something that should bother you a lot more than it probably does. Neuroscientists, the people who actually study how the brain works, they've done the research, they've run the numbers, and what they found is this. By the time you're 35 years old, to 95% of who you are is automatic, not chosen, not deliberate, not conscious, automatic. 95% of your thoughts today are the same thoughts you had yesterday. 95% of your emotional reactions, the way you respond to stress, to rejection, to compliments, to criticism are preset, preloaded, already decided. The way you carry yourself in a room, the way you speak to people you're trying to impress, the way you shrink or inflate in conflict, the things that make you feel guilty, the things that make you feel alive, the specific brand of self-criticism that plays on loop in your head at 2 in the morning, all of it, automated. Now neuroscientists call these habit loops. A cue triggers a routine. The routine delivers a reward, and the brain reinforces the pathway. Every time that loop runs, the neural groove gets deeper, more efficient, faster, more invisible. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, the one who spent his entire life mapping the hidden machinery of the human soul, he had a different word for it. He called it the complex, an emotionally charged cluster of automatic responses built around a core wound or belief that hijacks your behavior without your conscious awareness. You don't decide to get defensive when your work is criticized. The complex fires. You don't decide to self-destruct right when things start going well. The complex fires. You don't decide to keep picking partners who are somehow, mysteriously, the same as the last one. The complex fires. But you know what the most honest word for all of it is? Not habit loop, not complex. Prison. A prison where the cell door has been open the whole time. A prison where you are technically, physically free to leave at any moment. But you don't, because you don't even know you're in it. Because a prison you've lived in long enough stops feeling like captivity. It starts feeling like home. So here's the part nobody wants to hear. You didn't just fall into this prison. You built it, not maliciously, not stupidly. You built it the way any reasonable creature builds shelter to survive. Think about where habits actually come from, not the surface stuff, not the morning coffee routine or the phone before bed thing. Go deeper. The most powerful habits you have aren't behavioral, they're cognitive. They're the stories you run about who you are, what you're capable of, and what you deserve. And those stories, every single one of them, were written before you were old enough to fact-check them, somewhere between age 0 and age 7. Your brain was in a state that neuroscientists call theta wave dominance. Basically, the same brainwave state as hypnosis. You were recording everything. Everything. The tone of your parents' voice when they were disappointed, the way love was expressed or withheld, what happened when you were too much, too loud, too needy, too emotional, too ambitious, what happened when you failed, what happened when you succeeded and someone felt threatened by it. You weren't analyzing any of this. You were absorbing it directly into the operating system, and by the time your brain developed the capacity for critical thought, already in the background, already defining what felt normal. Here's the truly unsettling part about normal. Normal doesn't feel like a story. Normal feels like reality. Normal feels like truth. If you grew up in a home where expressing emotion got you dismissed or punished, then, as an adult, emotional suppression doesn't feel like a learned behavior. It feels like common sense. This is just how I am. I'm not an emotional person. If you grew up with chaos, with instability, with love that was conditional and unpredictable, then, as an adult, stable, consistent relationships feel boring, feel wrong, feel like something is missing, because your nervous system was calibrated to chaos, and calm feels unsettlingly like the quiet before something bad happens. If you grew up hearing, explicitly or implicitly, that ambition was dangerous, that wanting too much led to disappointment, that playing small was safe, then every time you're about to do something bold, something that actually matters to you, a voice will activate. And it won't sound like fear. It'll sound like wisdom. It'll sound like caution. It'll sound like your own voice saying, maybe wait, maybe later, maybe this isn't the right time. That voice is not wisdom. That voice is a wall built by a 7-year-old trying to survive an environment they had no power to change, and you have been listening to that 7-year-old make your adult decisions ever since. Every morning when you wake up, and I mean every morning, you believe you are beginning. You wake up, and there's this brief window, maybe 2-3 seconds before full consciousness kicks in, where everything feels possible, clean, open, and then the machinery starts, and without even noticing it, you are no longer beginning. You are continuing the thought patterns that have run every single day, continuing the emotional climate that was set years, sometimes decades, ago, continuing the identity, the specific, curated, defended version of yourself that you decided on somewhere in your past and have been maintaining ever since. This is what makes habit so insidious. It masquerades as you, not as programming, not as the residue of old wounds and borrowed beliefs, as you, as your personality, as your nature, as just how I am. I'm not a morning person. Is that a biological fact? Or a habit you've never seriously challenged? I'm bad with money. Is that an immutable truth? Or a script running on autopilot from a financial environment you grew up in? I'm not the kind of person who... Stop. Every time you say that sentence, ask yourself, who decided that? When? And based on what evidence? Evidence gathered by a child, a teenager, a younger version of you who was doing their best to survive, not to thrive. The habit is not the coffee. The habit is not the phone. The habit is not the junk food or the procrastination, or the late nights or the avoidance. Those are symptoms. The habit, the real habit, the one underneath everything else, is the story. The story about who you are. And stories, when you've been living inside them long enough, stop feeling like stories. They become the air. They become the architecture. They become the prison you don't even recognize as a prison, because it is completely, perfectly shaped like you. Here's a concept that once you understand it, you cannot unhear it. Psychologists call it identity protective cognition. It means this: the mind will actively distort information, reject evidence, and rationalize contradictions, not to find the truth, but to protect the existing identity. You don't change habits by wanting to change. You don't change habits by knowing you should change. You don't even change habits by having a really good reason to change. You change habits, real, deep habits, the kind running your life from the basement level, only when the identity shifts. James Clear figured this out and wrote an entire best-selling book about it. Doctors see it in patients who get life-threatening diagnoses. and still won't change their behavior. Therapists see it in clients who understand their patterns completely, intellectually, and still repeat them. Understanding is not transformation. The mind knows exactly what the prison looks like and still finds reasons to stay. Why? Because the prison is familiar, and the human brain will choose familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom every single time, unless forced to do otherwise. Think about that. Sit with the full weight of it. Familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom. That sentence explains more human behavior than almost any other idea in psychology. It explains why people stay in relationships they've outgrown, why people stay in careers that are slowly killing their spirit, why people chase the same type of connection, the same type of conflict, the same type of failure, in new clothes, new settings, new years over and over again. Not because they're stupid, not because they're broken, because the familiar, however painful, carries the comfort of predictability. And the unconscious mind, the part of you that actually runs the show, it will sacrifice happiness, growth, and even health to maintain that sense of predictability. The cell door is open. It has always been open, and the prisoner sits there, looking at the opening, and thinks, maybe tomorrow? Now, before this turns into the kind of video that diagnoses you beautifully, and then leaves you staring at the ceiling feeling hopeless, let's talk about what actually changes things, because change is possible. Real, deep, structural change is absolutely possible, but it doesn't come from willpower, and it doesn't come from motivation, and it definitely doesn't come from just knowing better. It comes from interruption, the habit loop cue, routine. Reward runs because it has never been seriously interrupted, because awareness never fully reaches it, because the automation is never actually paused long enough to be examined. The first thing, the most foundational thing, is what some call the observer. It's the practice of catching yourself in the act, not judging, not punishing, not immediately trying to change, just noticing. The moment you're about to do the automatic thing, the defensive response, the self-sabotage, the avoidance, the scroll, the shrink, and instead of just doing it, you notice you're about to do it. That microsecond of noticing, that is the crack in the wall. That is where the light gets in. Because here's what happens when you observe a habit instead of just running it. You disidentify from it. It stops being you and starts being a pattern you have. That is a completely different relationship. A habit you have can be changed. A habit you are. That feels like surgery on your soul. The second thing is, and Jung was emphatic about this, is integration, not elimination. The goal is not to destroy the patterns. The goal is to understand what they were originally trying to protect you from, and then decide, consciously, as an adult, whether that protection is still needed. The pattern of emotional shutdown, it was probably trying to protect you from unbearable pain at some point. Honor that, thank it, and then ask, is that threat still real? Or am I defending myself from a past that no longer exists, in a present that is actually safe? The pattern of self-sabotage, it was probably protecting your identity from the terrifying possibility of discovering that you tried your absolute best and it still didn't work. Acknowledge that, understand it, and then ask, is the risk of failure actually worse than the certainty of never finding out? You cannot fight your way out of this prison. You cannot discipline your way out of it. You can only illuminate your way out, slowly, honestly, with more patience for yourself than you probably think you deserve. So, here's where we land. You are, in all likelihood, living a life that is substantially, maybe even primarily, the result of patterns you did not consciously choose. Patterns inherited, absorbed, adopted before you had the cognitive equipment to evaluate them. Patterns that have been running in the background ever since, shaping what you think is possible, who you think you are, and what you think you deserve. And the terrifying thing is not that this is happening. The terrifying thing is how normal it feels, how much it feels like you, how much it feels like your personality, your preferences, your nature, rather than a program installed in you by circumstances you had no control over. The prison is real, and the door has been unlocked the entire time. But here's the thing about that door. Opening it doesn't just mean stepping into freedom. It means stepping into the unknown. It means meeting a version of yourself that has never been run before, a self that is not the sum of old responses to old wounds, a self that is genuinely, uncomfortably, exhilaratingly new. And that is exactly why most people won't do it. Not because they can't, because new is the most frightening thing the human mind can encounter. More frightening than failure, more frightening than pain, more frightening than the familiar suffering of the cage they've lived in for 20, 30, 40 years. New is frightening because it carries no guarantee. But here's what I know. The person you are right now, the version of you produced by decades of unexamined habit and inherited story and automated response, that person has already shown you exactly where they're going. You've seen that future. You're living it. The only thing uncertain is the other version, the one that exists on the other side of that open door, the one that asks, for real, not rhetorically, what would I be if I actually chose? That question, held seriously, that is not motivation. That is the beginning of freedom. And the beginning of freedom is the most dangerous, most necessary, most alive thing a human being can experience. You know where the door is, you always have.